Memphis-based rapper Adolph Robert Thornton Jr., better known as Young Dolph, was just 36 years old when he was shot dead in cold blood in November of 2021. He was visiting a local bakery when two men rolled up in a white Mercedes-Benz and opened fire on him, leaving his body riddled with at least 22 bullet wounds. Authorities charged 32-year-old Cornelius Smith and 23-year-old Justin Johnson with the musician's murder. During the trial in September of 2024, Smith took the stand and confessed to his role in the crime. He admitted that he had been hired to kill Thornton by Anthony Big Jook Mims, who had promised a $100,000 payment in exchange for Smith's services. Mims was the brother of rapper Yo Gotti, who was involved in a long-standing feud with Thornton's camp. He was murdered in January of 2024 amid the ongoing rap beef between the two parties. The payment for Thornton's murder was to be split up between Johnson, Smith, and a third suspect, 43-year-old Hernandez Goguen, but this apparently never happened, according to Smith, who revealed in court that he was paid around $800 for the hit. Johnson was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life, while the trial against Smith appears to be ongoing. Number 17. Alexander Kais and Alydia Gator. In March of 2024, 21-year-old Alexander Kais of Greece, New York, was convicted of assaulting and unlawfully imprisoning an 18-year-old high school student he had met online nearly 2 years earlier. He had invited the victim to visit him at his home and proceeded to assault and strangle her over a 2-day period before sending her to the hospital with his grandmother and a cover story claiming that she had been mugged. While awaiting sentencing, Kais and his girlfriend, 22-year-old Alydia Gator, allegedly plotted to have the judge overseeing his case murdered. Speaking with an undercover detective posing as a hitman, the couple reportedly planned to provide a down payment for the hit in the form of $1,750 worth of Xanax pills. In addition to wanting the judge killed, the pair are accused of seeking the murders of prosecutor Victoria Porter and a witness who had testified against Kais during his trial. According to authorities, Kais and Gator discussed their plans in detail during jailhouse phone calls in April of 2024. The couple and the teenage suspects were charged with attempted first-degree murder, second-degree conspiracy, and third-degree criminal sale of a controlled substance. Kais was already facing up to 57 years in prison, followed by up to 20 years of probation for his previous crimes when he was charged in connection with the murder-for-hire plot. Records show that he's serving a 30 to 35-year state prison sentence for his prior convictions, while Gator remains in custody at the Ontario County Jail amid the current case. Number 16. Alan Gesson. During the summer of 2022, a Massachusetts attorney in his late 40s named Alan Gesson fell under FBI investigation for suspected money laundering. He developed a rapport with an undercover agent who he told about his years-long child custody dispute with his former partner, Zimbabwean model Priscilla Chigariro. Believing that the undercover was a corrupt immigration official, Gesson initially offered $100,000 in bribes in exchange for Chigariro being deported, but his desire to eliminate his ex from the picture soon took on a more sinister objective, with Gesson trying to persuade the undercover to assist him in the search for a hitman to kill Chigariro. He was willing to pay $50,000 for what he saw as a cheaper and more permanent solution to his problems. During his conversations with the undercover, Gesson revealed that he had tried hiring someone to kill Chigariro in the past, but the deal fell through when the paid assassin raised their price to $230,000. After coming to an agreement with the undercover, he wired $23,000 to a bank account controlled by the FBI and provided details about Chigariro's location, routine, and lifestyle. Following his arrest in July of 2022, Gesson was convicted of 1 count of murder for hire, landing him a 10-year federal prison sentence, which will be followed by 3 years of supervised release. Number 15. Jennifer Sweeney. In late 2015, 41-year-old Tyrita Julius of Tinton Falls, New Jersey, lost interest in her lover, Jennifer Sweeney. Instead of trying to get over it and move on, Sweeney recruited a former high school classmate, 38-year-old Andre Harris, to kill Julius and provided a gun to carry out the hit with. Julius was sitting in her car with her teenage daughter when Harris fired 8 bullets in her direction. She survived the shooting, and Sweeney treated it as an opportunity to swoop in and act like a protector in a bid to rekindle their relationship. Sweeney was still weak and recovering from her injuries when Julius strangled her to death with an electric cord in March of 2016. Prior to the discovery of the victim's body, her family reported her missing. When questioned by police, Sweeney claimed she had dropped Julius off at the Long Branch train station and had no knowledge of her current whereabouts. She even joined the search for Julius despite knowing that the woman was dead, and carried on with the ruse for months leading up to the discovery of Julius's body in Andre Harris's backyard. According to prosecutors, Sweeney killed Julius for rejecting her. Both she and Harris were charged in connection with the attempted murder and murder of Julius. Harris ended up taking a plea deal and testifying against Sweeney, whose case finally went to trial in late 2021. During his testimony, he claimed that Sweeney had threatened to kill his family if he didn't kill Julius. Sweeney was found guilty of murder, attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, desecrating human remains, tampering with evidence, and weapon-related counts. She maintained her innocence even after being found guilty and was therefore unapologetic for her crimes. The convicted killer was sentenced to life in prison for murder plus 20 years for the attempted murder, to be served consecutively, amounting to a 95-year sentence. Under New Jersey law, she must serve 85% of her sentence, or nearly 81 years, before becoming eligible for parole. Harris was sentenced to 16 years in prison and must also serve 85% of his term before he'll be considered for parole. He apologized for his actions during his sentencing hearing, saying to the victim's relatives, "I don't know what to say. I'm asking for you to forgive me." Number 14. Kevin Lewis. 24-year-old Alicia Canales Maguire was fatally gunned down in September 2017 while babysitting her sister's 3 children in Everett, Washington. Her sister, Amanda Canales, was the intended target of the gunfire and was out of town on business at the time. The investigation into the crime initially yielded few leads, and within a year the case had all but gone cold. Finally, in August of 2018, detectives received a tip from someone familiar with one of the parties involved. According to police, the attack was orchestrated by Amanda's ex-husband, 31-year-old Kevin Lewis. He had a history of violence against the intended victim, including a previous jail stint for assault. Amanda Canales had started to fear for her life in the months leading up to her sister's murder when Lewis threatened to kill her if she refused to give him full custody of their kids and paid child support. The hit was carried out by Lewis's cousin, 20-year-old Jerridan Phelps, who rode to the murder scene with a young woman named Alexis Hale. Phelps, who received $2,400 in exchange for the hit, would later claim that he paid Hale $200 for the gun that he used to kill Canales Maguire. He also said that he didn't know who he was supposed to kill, but that he simply went to the address Lewis had given him and killed the person who was there. Authorities charged Lewis, Phelps, and Hale with murder. In July of 2020, Phelps pleaded guilty and was sentenced to more than 31 years in prison. Hale also pleaded guilty and received a 15-year prison sentence. In early 2022, a jury found Lewis guilty of aggravated first-degree murder, which comes with an automatic life sentence without parole in the state of Washington. He was permanently banned from contacting his ex-wife and their kids. Number 13. Ishna Lopez Ramos. 42-year-old Janice Marie Zengotita Torres mysteriously went missing from her Osceola County, Florida home in January of 2018. Investigators would later learn that she had been followed home from work by a pair of assailants, forced into her own car and abducted in a case of mistaken identity. The kidnappers, 23-year-old Alexis Ramos Rivera and 22-year-old Glorian Marie Quinones Montez, had been hired by 35-year-old Ishna Lopez Ramos to kill her romantic rival. They had mistaken her for the intended target while sitting in the parking lot outside the store she worked at and waiting for a woman of her description to leave the building. At some point after kidnapping, Zengotita Torres, Ramos Rivera, and Quinones Montez realized they had abducted the wrong person. They nevertheless forced her to hand over her ATM card and PIN number, then beat and suffocated her to death and dumped her body in Ormond Beach. Lopez Ramos continued to use the victim's ATM card, which made it fairly easy for the police to track her down. She confessed to the crime and implicated her co-conspirators, who also gave full confessions. Gloria Ann Marie Quinones Montes took a plea deal and was sentenced to 22 years in prison. Alexis Ramos Rivera and Ishna Lopez Ramos were found guilty of first-degree murder and other charges and were sentenced to life without parole. Number 12. Trevor D. 22-year-old Daniel Alejo was driving in Fishers, Indiana, in November of 2022 when he spotted an Acura that was sitting in the road with its brake lights on. He honked and drove around the car, which then began to aggressively follow him. The Acura trailed so closely behind Alejo's vehicle that he brake-checked the driver, which only served to further enrage the person behind the wheel. As Alejo approached the Maya grocery store that he planned to shop at, the Acura cut him off. Realizing how serious the situation was, he decided that his shopping could wait and turned his vehicle around in an attempt to get away from the other driver. But the Acura continued to follow him, and the driver eventually pulled up beside him and fired 3 gunshots in his direction. Alejo was injured but survived, and police arrested the Acura driver, 24-year-old Trevor D, for attempted murder, aggravated battery, criminal recklessness, and pointing a firearm. A passenger who was in Dahl's vehicle said that he often gets upset while driving, and Dahl's girlfriend reportedly admitted to police that he has major anger issues. Just days earlier, Dahl had lost his temper at a salt truck driver in Noblesville for forcing him to slow down. The truck driver told police that Dahl had threatened to kill him and fired a single gunshot into the ear before peeling away from the scene. While awaiting trial for shooting Alejo, Dahl was accused of trying to hire a hitman to kill 2 witnesses who were expected to testify against him. Police learned of these efforts after a confidential informant turned over 2 letters Dahl had written containing instructions and details regarding the murder-for-hire plot, including descriptions of the intended targets and where those individuals lived. He offered his car as a payment for the hits and engaged in several conversations with a member of law enforcement, posing as a hitman. When Dahl called his parents from jail and asked them to leave his keys in his car, they refused. He launched into a tirade about how his mother and father were messing things up for him, but he soon realized he had much bigger problems on his hands. When law enforcement confronted him about the murder-for-hire plot, records show that Dahl pleaded guilty to 2 attempted murder charges and is currently serving a 37-year prison sentence. Number 11. Beau Cormier. In early 2021, 35-year-old Beau Cormier of Montagut, Louisiana, was accused of hiring 2 hitmen to kill his niece, who was slated to testify against him in an upcoming assault trial. At the time, he was already a convicted predator, and he knew that he would likely face a substantial prison sentence if he was found guilty of the assault charge. The alleged assassins, 25-year-old Andrew Eskine and 22-year-old Dalvin Wilson, killed the wrong victims. Instead of murdering Cormier's niece, they fatally shot the girl's mother, Cormier's 34-year-old sister Brittany, and the woman's neighbor, 37-year-old Hope Nettleton. Brittany died protecting her daughter, according to friends who told reporters that the intended victim was hiding in a closet at the time of the double homicide. Cormier, Eskine, and Wilson were all charged in connection with the murders. According to the police, the trio had conducted surveillance on the residence in the month leading up to the botched hit. Following their arrests, prosecutors said that the death penalty was absolutely on the table. While the specific outcomes of the case are unclear, records show that all 3 men are currently serving time in state prison. Number 10. Christopher Pence. In 2021, a Microsoft engineer named Christopher Pence turned to the dark web in an attempt to hire a hitman to kill the biological parents of his 5 adopted children. He paid a phony murder-for-hire website $16,000 to carry out the hits on the couple, who live in upstate New York, and was identified as a suspect after federal investigators traced the transaction to his Cedar City, Utah home. Pence also provided the website with photos and details of the intended victims. and the manner in which he wanted them killed. He wanted the murders to look like accidents or the results of a burglary gone wrong, and made it clear that he did not want any children in the house harmed. At the time, Pence was reportedly entangled in a custody dispute with the targets, who were fighting to regain custody of their kids. The children's biological mother, Christina Cardona, would later tell the Daily Mail that she hadn't seen the kids in upwards of 2 years despite a court-ordered agreement granting her visitation rights. According to court documents, there were also disagreements between the families about how the children should be raised. Following his arrest, Pence admitted that he had tried hiring someone to kill Christina and her husband Francisco. In December of 2023, he pleaded guilty to soliciting the couple's murders and was sentenced to 7 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of post-release supervision. Christina Cardona told the Daily Mail that the two families were attempting to restore a cordial relationship in Pence's absence, and that she hoped his wife would be open to honoring the visitation agreement. Number 9. Stephen Allwine. In 2016, a dark web user nicknamed Dodge God contacted a bogus assassin for hire website requesting the murder of a 43-year-old Minnesota woman named Amy Allwine. The person accused Amy of sleeping with their husband and trying to destroy their career. They wanted her dead badly enough to pay $6,000 in Bitcoin for the hit, which was never carried out. But this would have seemed highly unlikely to anyone that knew Amy, who owned a dog training business and wasn't the type of person to interfere with someone else's relationship. She was also a devout member of her church, where her husband, Stephen, served as an elder and a marriage counselor. The FBI warned Allwine about the attempt on her life and investigated several people, but found no evidence that any of them were involved. 6 months later, Stephen Allwine called 911 and claimed he had found Amy dead from a gunshot wound inside their home. He told responding officers that Amy had not felt well all day and that she had told him to stop checking on her when he showed concern for her well-being. The seemingly distraught widower claimed that he found Amy unresponsive after returning home from running an errand. Stephen's story about the events leading up to the discovery didn't add up, making him a person of interest in the case. There was a large amount of an incapacitating drug in Amy's system, and surveillance footage showed Stephen coming and going from the residence around the time of her death, further heightening investigators' suspicions that he had killed his wife. Additionally, Stephen had recently cheated on Amy with a woman he met on the Ashley Madison affair-seeking website. The Allwine's church frowned heavily upon divorce, leading authorities to suspect that Stephen saw killing Amy as the only way to end his marriage without losing his good standing as an elder. This also led to suspicions that he was the dark web user who had tried to hire a hitman to murder Amy. Investigators traced the Bitcoin payments to Stephen, and he was charged with Amy's murder despite his claims of innocence. In 2018, a jury found him guilty of first-degree murder. Stephen was sentenced to life without parole and remains behind bars. After unsuccessfully appealing his case several times, he maintains his innocence to this day. Number 8. Whitney Franks. In 2020, a 26-year-old retail worker named Whitney Franks discovered that both she and a co-worker, Ruth Rutner, were having affairs with their boss, James Prest, who supervised them at a sporting goods store in Milton Keynes, England. Prest already had a long-term partner and children, but somehow managed to find time for his affair with Franks, which began in 2016, and his other tryst with Rutner, which began the following year. By the time Franks discovered that Prest was also seeing Rutner, she had been transferred to another store, most likely as a strategy to keep her from finding out about the other affair. Authorities would later accuse her of following Prest due to her detailed knowledge of his movements. By then, Prest had already made efforts to distance himself from Franks, who continuously begged him to give her another chance. During this same time period, someone posted an ad on the dark web seeking a hitman to kill Rutner. The poster said they were willing to pay $1,300 or more in exchange for the murder of Rutner, who they claimed had caused a lot of problems in their life. When police visited Rutner to warn her about the attempt on her life, she shared her suspicion that Franks had posted the ad. Her hunch proved correct, and Franks was arrested for solicitation of murder. While the website proved to be a sham, Franks had reportedly been under the impression that she had gotten in touch with a member of a Mexican drug cartel who was willing to carry out the hit. She argued in court that she never truly meant to have Rutner killed, but the jury found her guilty as charged. Franks was initially sentenced to 12 years in prison, but the term was eventually cut in half after she successfully argued that her original punishment was too harsh. Number 7. James Juan. In April of 2022, a 54-year-old doctor from Duluth, Georgia, named James Juan, tried hiring a hitman to murder his girlfriend through the dark web. According to prosecutors, he requested for the woman to be shot and for her death to appear accidental. Juan told the site's administrator that the hitman could take the victim's car, wallet, and phone if they wanted. After accidentally sending an $8,000 down payment to the wrong Bitcoin wallet, he sent another $8,000 to the correct recipient. Juan got impatient while waiting for his order to be fulfilled and repeatedly contacted the website inquiring about the ongoing delay. After determining that Juan's intentions seemed serious, a tipster contacted the FBI, who warned the man's girlfriend of the threat to her life and launched an investigation. At some point, Juan must have suspected that the authorities were onto him. He abruptly cancelled his order, but admitted during questioning that he had routinely tried to check on the status of his request. Juan was arrested in May of 2022 and was fired from his job shortly thereafter. He pleaded guilty to 1 count of using a facility of interstate commerce in the commission of murder for hire and was sentenced to 7 years in federal prison, followed by 2 years of supervised release. His motive for wanting his girlfriend dead remains unclear. Number 6. Christy Falcons. In 2016, a single mother of 3 from Nevada named Christy Falcons went on the dark web in search of a hitman to kill her ex-husband, Gabe Scott, who lived in North Carolina. She contacted a website called Bessa Mafia with a description of the services she sought and subsequently provided a $5,000 Bitcoin payment after negotiating the price. Falcons instructed the site's administrator to make her ex's death look like a mugging gone wrong and to kill the intended victim at a time when she would be traveling in order to ensure that she had an airtight alibi. She also mentioned that she didn't care if her ex's new partner was harmed during the commission of the crime. Like most dark web murder for hire websites, however, Bessa Mafia is not real. It's a scam to profit from those who try to utilize its advertised services, and someone had passed Falcons' messages on to law enforcement. When Falcons' ex failed to turn up dead after she paid for the hit, she became impatient. The FBI was watching as she became increasingly desperate and demanding with her tone, even offering to pay an extra $4,000 in order to get the job done as soon as possible. She also offered to make additional payments once her ex's life insurance policy paid out. In 2020, Falcons was indicted on a federal murder for hire charge. Following her arrest, she admitted that she stood to profit from Scott's death, but insisted that this was not her primary motive for wanting him dead. Describing Scott as a master manipulator, she claimed that he had abused her in various ways and that he was trying to take their children away from her. Falcons pleaded guilty to the charge and was sentenced to 5 years in prison. In 2022, Scott was featured on the British Channel 4 docuseries How to Hire a Hitman. He said that he and Falcons were high school sweethearts who had met in the early 2000s. They had been married for 12 years when their marriage hit a slump, leading to the prospect of a divorce. Scott believed that Falcons was motivated by money, stating, "To say this money is worth more than me to my kids, that's the line that shouldn't have been crossed." Number 5. Joshua and Jeremiah Piker. In May of 2024, authorities charged a U.S. Army sergeant and his incarcerated brother in a failed murder for hire scheme targeting 4 victims. 30-year-old Jeremiah Piker is accused of conspiring with 32-year-old Joshua Piker, the latter of whom initially solicited his cellmate at a Connecticut prison to hire a hitman in 2022. The intended target consisted of a 29-year-old mother, her 2 young children, and her 23-year-old boyfriend. According to court documents, Joshua's cellmate agreed to find a hitman at the cost of $10,000 per victim, plus a $500 finder's fee. Jeremiah reportedly made a $250 down payment to the inmate's commissary account, while Joshua provided the hired assassin with the victim's personal information, along with details about where to find a spare key to the family's home. Instead of following through with the plot, however, the cellmate sent the female victim a letter detailing the attempt on her life. The police got involved, and the cellmate revealed that he never planned to commit the murders but had simply wanted to collect the money. Meanwhile, Jeremiah denied any knowledge that children were being targeted in the scheme. According to the most recent available updates, both brothers remain in custody amid the ongoing case. Number 4. Josephina Cardona. In April 2024, deputies in Palm Beach County, Florida, responded to a call in Lake Worth Beach about an ongoing murder-for-hire investigation. A confidential informant told them that a woman known only as Maria had been looking for a hitman. Investigators traced Maria's phone number to a 43-year-old woman named Josephina Cardona, whose teenage son, Manuel Marcos Cardona, had recently been convicted of second-degree murder. In that particular incident, the young man had stabbed a man who was trying to break up a fight at a child's birthday party. According to reports, Cardona, her son, and her husband had all shown up at the party uninvited, triggering the fight that led to the fatal stabbing. Cardona wanted to pay someone $8,000 to kill 2 witnesses who she believed were responsible for sending her son to prison. Speaking with an undercover detective posing as an assassin for hire, she requested for one of the targets to be shot in the body for the sake of making them suffer in pain. She met up with the undercover officer several times to discuss the murder plans, including in front of both intended victims' homes. During these meetings, Cardona also showed the undercover officer photos of her targets and discussed why she wanted them dead. In early May, Cardona was charged with 2 counts of solicitation to commit murder. She remains in custody at the Palm Beach County Detention Center with bail set at $550,000. Number 3. Siosi Maya Tupalahi and Yusuf Zureka. Shortly after 8 a.m. one morning in July of 2024, a balaclava-clad man was seen approaching a car in Sydney's eastern suburbs and pointing a gun at someone in the driver's seat. Later identified as 24-year-old Siosi Maya Tupalahi, the suspect continued to point the weapon for several seconds as the man in the driver's seat raised his hands. Tupalahi then got into a getaway car and sped away from the scene. According to police, the getaway car was being driven by 20-year-old Yusuf Zureka, who refused to pull over during an attempted traffic stop and led law enforcement on a high-speed chase. He was promptly arrested when the vehicle finally came to a stop, while Tupalahi resisted arrest and fled on foot. After wrestling with police officers, Tupalahi managed to evade arrest for another half hour before the cops caught up with him and tased him. Inside the suspect's car, officers found loaded guns with serial numbers obscured. According to law enforcement, Tupalahi and Zureka were in the area to murder the driver of a luxury SUV, but had unintentionally targeted the wrong person. The pair were charged with conspiracy to commit murder. It was later revealed that the intended target was a businessman and former nightclub owner named John Ibrahim, who is not suspected or accused of any wrongdoing. The case against the suspects is ongoing, and authorities have yet to reveal who ordered the hit and why. Today's topic was requested by Mark GG6C, Cyberman Dan 1960, and Nikki123BXD. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comment section below. Number 2. Armando Escarcega Valdez. Mexican journalist Ciro Gomez Leiva was on his way home from work in December of 2022 when he was attacked outside Mexico City by 2 armed suspects who approached his vehicle on a motorcycle. He avoided injury thanks to his armored vehicle, which protected him from the onslaught of bullets. More than a year went by without any arrests, causing frustration among those who wanted to see justice served. Finally, in 2024, a gang leader named Armando Escarcega Valdez was arrested in the United States on suspicion of ordering the botched hit also known as Armando Escarcega Saldaña and nicknamed El Patron. He was extradited to Mexico to face criminal charges in court. The identity of the actual shooters is yet to be revealed, and the case appears to be ongoing. Following Valdez's arrest, Leiva said that it wasn't exactly accurate to say that he was the mastermind of the attempt on his life. He described Valdez as more of a coordinator rather than the brains behind the operation, and believes that someone above Valdez ordered the hit. The outcome of the case remains to be seen. If you haven't seen it yet, stay tuned till after number 1 because we've got our previous release of When Running Your Mouth Goes Wrong coming up right after number 1. Number 1. Botched Montreal Mob Hit. 72-year-old Angelo D'Onofrio was reading the newspaper outside a cafe in Montreal in June of 2016 when a gunman exited a nearby vehicle and opened fire on him. The shooters, 28-year-old Ibamba Indutu Dufao and 25-year-old Jeff Jubens Theus, had mistaken the senior citizen for a notorious mob boss named Antonio Vanelli. After killing the elderly man in an onslaught of bullets, the suspects fled the scene following the botched hit. Police informed Vanelli of the attempt on his life. Vanelli said that his car was parked near the crime scene but that he was inside a funeral home mourning the death of another mafia member who had recently been murdered. It took about a year for law enforcement to start putting these pieces together and for any arrests to be made. During that time, D'Onofrio was incorrectly associated with the mafia, which his wife said he had no part of. She was not only upset about the mix-up, but by the fact that the family did not receive an apology from the authorities after the confusion was sorted out, which she felt had left a bad mark on her family's reputation and had complicated the grieving process. According to investigators, Theus was the shooter while Dufao drove the getaway car. Dufao pleaded guilty to second-degree murder right as his trial was about to begin. He was sentenced to life with the possibility of parole after 13 years. Theus took his case to trial and was found guilty of first-degree murder, resulting in an automatic life sentence with a minimum of 25 years before he'll become eligible to apply for parole. On June the 26th of 2021, an off-duty police officer was knocked out at a wedding reception in Knoxville, Tennessee for pestering a man with racist comments. While in the parking lot of the wedding venue, 22-year-old Tanner Holt told Jonathan Tony that he didn't know they let black people in the reception hall. Tony, a black man, repeatedly asked the heavily intoxicated Holt to stop talking about race. The white officer refused to do so, insisting he was part of the black community. Tony couldn't take it anymore and punched Holt once, knocking him out. Officers from the Knoxville Police Department arrived at the scene, but no criminal charges were filed against Tony. Holt was taken to a hospital and subsequently recovered. He resigned from the force in October amidst an internal affairs investigation into his conduct and comments at the wedding. No charges were filed against him either. Number 7. Wolford Lomax. On Christmas Day 2008, James Joseph Cialela was in a South Philadelphia movie theater watching a screening of The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. 31-year-old Wolford Lomax was also at the Riverview movie theater with his girlfriend and her teenage children. It was reported that they kept talking and laughing during the movie. A man in front of them, not Cialela, told them to quiet down, and Lomax reportedly replied, "We can't laugh?" A brawl ensued between that man and Lomax, during the course of which 29-year-old Cialela intervened and threw popcorn at the latter. He then brandished a Kel-Tec 380 handgun and shot Lomax in the left arm, breaking it. Two versions of events emerged in the aftermath of Cialela's arrest for attempted murder, aggravated assault, and weapons violations. Lomax's testimony depicted him as the main aggressor, but Cialela's defense argued that he was punched and choked as he tried to break up the fight and fired his weapon in self-defense. Cialela had spent 5 months in Iraq with the army before being honorably discharged in September. The attempted murder charge was eventually thrown out, with his lawyer stating, "He's a marksman. If he wanted to shoot to kill, he would have." In November of 2010, Cialela pleaded guilty to aggravated assault and other charges, for which he was sentenced to up to 23 months of house arrest and 5 years of probation. Number 6. Franklin Williams. On July the 31st of 2018, Franklin Williams appeared before Judge John Russo in Cleveland, Ohio. after he'd been convicted in connection to a string of armed robberies. Throughout the 54-minute hearing, 32-year-old Williams interrupted Russo, prosecutors, and his own defense team dozens of times. Courtroom video footage showed the judge repeatedly scolding Williams as he demanded a chance to speak, stating, "You are trying to take my life and you are not letting me tell you what's going on." Russo claimed that the man would have the opportunity to address the court after arguments from his legal representatives were heard. As he continued to interrupt the proceedings, Russo warned him that he would be gagged, but Williams persisted in his outbursts. The judge then ordered the deputies to tape the man's mouth. Williams tried to get up, but 6 deputies forced him back into his seat and placed a strip of red tape over his mouth. The video made national and international headlines, and the move was criticized by several human rights organizations, including the American Civil Liberties Union of Ohio, who described it as humiliating. Russo apologized for the decision a week later and recused himself from Williams' final sentencing. Judge Patricia Cosgrove was appointed by the Supreme Court in his stead, and she presided over Williams' sentencing in February of 2019. The defendant made no interruptions, and when he had a chance to address the court, he tried to portray himself as a social justice icon in a 12-minute statement. Williams didn't apologize to his robbery victims, instead focusing on the previous incident with Russo, claiming he'd been treated like a dog about to be put to sleep and suffered the ultimate humiliation. Williams was a repeat offender who'd been imprisoned 4 times in the past. His crimes included robbery, kidnapping, leading the police on a high-speed chase, as well as cutting off his ankle monitor and fleeing the state in the midst of his trial in 2017. Cosgrove called Williams a narcissistic individual who blamed others for his own actions and who'd escalated his offending over the course of a decade. In spite of spending time in prison, Russo had previously sentenced Williams to 24 years in prison, but Cosgrove handed him a 33-year sentence. Number 5. Donald Mangan. 53-year-old Kansas man Donald Mangan was arrested by Reno County law enforcement in October of 2018 for cutting a man on the forearm. Police responded to a late-night call at Mangan's home, where they found Harlan Bailey on the floor with a laceration. 53-year-old Bailey told officers that Mangan had cut him because he wouldn't stop talking while he was trying to watch TV. The laceration was deep enough that the victim needed multiple stitches. Mangan was taken into custody for aggravated battery and subsequently appeared via video link from Reno County Jail. Magistrate Judge Cheryl Allen presented the details of the case to Mangan, highlighting that he'd threatened to stab Bailey if he continued to speak. Mangan replied, "That's right," during the proceedings, and he remained jailed on a $25,000 bond. Number 4. Laesa Beard. Oregon woman Laesa Beard was arrested for disorderly conduct in the spring of 2011 for loudly talking on her cell phone while on a train from Oakland, California to Salem, Oregon. Passengers reported that 39-year-old Beard was on the phone for an estimated 16 hours and had become aggressive when she was confronted and asked to be quiet. She was involved in a verbal altercation with others on the train before resuming the loud conversation, in spite of operators asking riders not to use their cell phones. Amtrak staff called the police following repeated passenger complaints. Operators halted the train about 2 miles from Salem, resulting in a 20-minute delay while Beard was taken into custody. The Tigard resident later told Portland's KATU News that she'd felt disrespected in the incident. Number 3. Christopher Charles Lightsey. In 1995, Christopher Charles Lightsey was on trial in California for the murder of his neighbor, cancer patient William George Compton. By then, Lightsey already had amassed a criminal record that included convictions for drugs and inappropriate contact with minors. He was also considered a suspect in the 1990 unsolved murder of Jessica Martinez, but wasn't charged. In 1993, he attacked 76-year-old Compton, who was his neighbor on Holtby Road in Bakersfield. Lightsey fatally stabbed him 42 times and stole his gun collection, as well as a jar of coins and other items. He was ultimately tracked down, arrested and charged after one of Compton's rifles ended up at a pawn shop. On August 15th of 1995, Laesa had a series of courtroom outbursts that involved yelling out obscenities and making obscene gestures at the prosecution. The judge had threatened to remove Laesa from the courtroom, but ultimately decided to have him gagged with duct tape and a wad of gauze. A photo from the proceedings would show the restrained man maintaining up his disruptive behavior and showing the middle finger. Laesa's outbursts possibly stemmed from mental health issues, as evaluators had deemed he had a narcissistic personality disorder and bipolar disorder, manic type. There was, however, speculation that his behavior in court was his attempt at being declared insane. Laesa was ultimately deemed competent to stand trial, found guilty, and sentenced to death. Number 2. Kashonte Short. On September the 10th of 2020, Michigan woman Kashonte Short filed a lawsuit against a man named Richard Jordan for standing her up on a date. Short argued that he'd intentionally caused her emotional distress because the date coincided with her late mother's birthday. They both appeared in Flint court via Zoom in the summer of 2022, and the video subsequently went viral mainly due to Short's interaction with Judge Herman Marable Jr. He initially told the woman that she'd filed the suit in district court when she should have opted for circuit court. Jordan didn't do much talking during the hearing. When asked by the judge if he'd be defending himself, the man said that he thought the suit in which Short demanded $10,000 was a waste of time, given that he'd only been on one bad date with her. Short then accused Jordan of perjury, claiming that she had the documents to prove it. Marable replied that she couldn't make that determination before asking her if she knew what perjury meant. An argument ensued during which Short repeatedly claimed that the judge was insulting her intelligence. Marable tried to explain why perjury didn't apply to the circumstances, but the conversation devolved into a shouting match. Short grew increasingly frustrated, screaming at the judge, repeatedly asking if they were done and refusing to answer his questions. At one point, Marable ripped off his face shield and demanded that the woman stop talking over him. A second bout of shouting erupted after Short seemingly failed to grasp that she'd have to cover Jordan's fees for filing the suit in the wrong court. The judge ultimately muted the Zoom call and transferred the suit to circuit court, but its chances of success were limited, given Short's behavior and her history of initiating lawsuits deemed frivolous. In 2020, she'd sued the Flint Police Department for $300 million and also filed a suit against AT&T, both of which were dismissed. Number 1. Esmeralda Upton. In August of 2022, a Texas realtor was arrested after she was captured on video verbally abusing a group of Indian women. The encounter occurred outside the 60 Vines wine bar in Plano, and its main aggressor was identified as 58-year-old Esmeralda Upton. Indrani Banerjee, Bidisha Rudra, and their friends were in the parking lot when Upton approached them and launched a racist tirade. Among a multitude of slurs, Upton said, "I hate these Indians, and if things are so great in your country, then stay there." She lunged at the women twice and tried to grab their phones upon realizing that they were filming her. When one of the women called the police, Upton reached into her purse and reportedly threatened to shoot them. Fortunately, the situation didn't result in further violence as officers from the Plano Police Department arrived at the scene and separated them. When asked why she'd attacked the women, Upton reportedly told law enforcement that it was because they'd been filming her, adding, "That's what they do, just like black people." She claimed to be Native American and Mexican American, while also mentioning that she lived in a $1.5 million house. Upton was jailed on a $10,000 bond on charges of assault and making threats. Banerjee reported that she'd been a resident of the Dallas area for 29 years, but had never felt so humiliated, threatened, and scared. As of October 2022, she and Rudra had sued Upton for causing them emotional distress. Thanks for watching. Would you rather be hunted by Richard Kuklinski or by the Zodiac Killer, and why? Let us know in the comment section below.